Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. It's 9:02. We'll start the regular finance meeting of the Finance Committee. It's October 2nd. So calling this meeting to order. So roll call.
Chair Shirley,
Here.
Vice Chair Peak,
Here.
Director McKee. We have a quorum.
Open it up for public communications. Any public communications on anything that's not on the agenda? Do we have any? Nothing online, right? Okay, good. All right, we'll move on to 4A, approving the Finance Committee meeting minutes.
Approved.
I'll second that. I think we both are in favor of approving those minutes. All right, 4B, discuss the draft list operations agreement.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday we met with a key big company to discuss a couple of items that came up from our board meeting in the first review of the draft agreement. That first item or component was rate increases and what rate increases were going to look like. In the existing agreement, we have a rate table that has a designated percentage per annual year, per calendar year. And that's what the rate is going to be prescribed on in that agreement. We have an opportunity to, we had the discussion with Keith Day. The opportunity is we have an option. We can prescribe a certain percentage across the 15-year term and then prescribe something for the additional extension year. Or we can use the annual CPI, and Keith Day did not lean to one or the other. He definitely left it in our ballpark. He did mention that he would prefer to have a ceiling and a floor like we do with our union agreements as well. Usually they'll have a ceiling so that they don't go past a certain percentage, and then a floor so that it's never zero. So at this time, we could hear from both of you on that one item of the table and the rate setting mechanism that we would put into the existing draft agreement. That was an item that was brought up at the board meeting.
And so as it's written, I think it's going off of CPI. Was there a floor and a ceiling written in the draft or wasn't?
There is not.
Okay. All right. Bill.
Okay. Right. I thank you for that. The CPI with a floor and ceiling sounds good, because it's then it's open, it's very transparent. We're not baking in we're not baking in some numbers that we don't know. Let me go back though. I'm just thinking that a 15 years going from annual to 15 years is quite a leap, and I understand the benefits of going to a long-term contract. There's this experience level, people trust each other, the system is working. Let's make it 10 years. And because a lot of things can change. 15 years is a long time for all sorts of unexpected things to happen. Pandemics, rampant inflation, earthquakes, whatever. So why 10 years ratchets, obviously it ratchets it back a bit, but also the capital depreciation for heavy equipment is 5 to 7 years, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And so the 10 years fits well within the capital depreciation for purchasing heavy equipment to satisfy. So anyhow, long story short, 10 years suggested plus the 5 post-year add-ons. So
That being said, so you're making a recommendation of a
Yeah.
10-year.
I don't
Yeah.
necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
I will say.
Okay.
I think we've had a good working relationship with Keith Day. I think that I think the agreement allows a lot of communication within that 15 years to kind of go back. If there's something, I'm just thinking if there is something that happens that where we need to, renegotiate or talk to Keep Day. I think that this agreement provides that space for that. I think having the 15 years gives everyone, both parties a little bit of like, okay, relief. In that we know where we're at, and it's long-term enough to where they can make those investments. And not worry about us pulling it out from under them. Not that we would, but again, I think the agreement allows enough communication that things could be worked out within,
Okay,
if something were to come up.
so what is the language in the agreement that allows for this, that you just described?
Right,
I have a couple of comments before we start looking at,
Sure.
we can look into the
Yeah.
detail. There's some benefits of this. We're going through a heavy transition with the capital investment that we're making through the Cal recycle grant and through the ReGen dollars collected at the gate rate to go into a cast in the next year and a half time period. That's gonna take a good working relationship to make that transition from one composting processing site, they're processing the material in a different manner, so the operation is going to change. I think this is where we really need that time and tenure with one another so that we can learn that operation together. We don't want to be trying to transition as we're introducing the cast into what we're doing. I think the other item is usually the longer the term of the agreements is, the farther that you can spread your depreciation period. Usually it's 10 years. For your last franchise agreement that you guys signed with Green Waste Recoveries, it was a 15-year term agreement. I guarantee you the company's depreciating that equipment over a 15-year period, just to nominize the expense factor on a per annum basis. So that being said, if we do consider 10 years, is the 25-year period with the extension still acceptable? We have 120 to 130 years of life. I agree with Kim that there's language in there, and we can have Rob review it again after we're done conducting all the information, and make it a priority for Rob to make sure that we have outs and ins. I was able to that is gonna be the essential point of the contract. At any point of the contract, if anything goes awry or legislation changes, we'll have to be ready, and the language in the contract should have that availability for us to get in and out. If we have that, I'm very, very comfortable with 15 years, because it's part of our plan as well. The plan for us to be prepared for 2036. This will fall right before then. It just adds to the complications of transition. If we're in the position to reduce the amount of volume that's coming from the external contracts that we have, this is a piece of that puzzle. This is a piece where we have to say, this would take 15 years, would take us to 2039, and then have an option of 5 more years, or decide at that point it's time to, it's changed so much that it's time to change what we want to be doing here. But I think it falls right into what we've been talking about in sustaining our revenue streams, and also the impacts that we can see would change, and we don't want to see an inflation in what it costs us today. I've seen Monterey City disposals increase this morning. It's going up 18%. It sounds very significant when we look at the price. Still one of the best in the county.
Libby, can you speak to the 15 years in terms of what Keith Day wanted? Did he want 20 and we said 15, or did we say 10 and he said no, let's.
I think he was really happy with the extension period. I think the 15 years was the result of getting the operating permit in the transition. He wanted a certain amount of period where he didn't feel we're handing over the operating permit, and in 3 years from now, I'm getting walked out the door. He also has that fear and risk, and he's been doing the year to year. He's demonstrated when he came on in 2009, so he's been here for 11 years. I think he ran under from 2009 to 2021 under this last agreement. He came in when the last enterprise was failing. And we were possibly going to lose that operation at that time. He came in and he's helped salvage it. In 2022, he also came in when we had to pivot with legislation for 1383 to get food waste into the green waste basket. His operation changed at that point. And we worked together between ReGen and Keith Day to make sure that those costs associated were met in an agreement fashion. I think he's demonstrated the partnership. We've also seen our Salina Solid Waste Authority in the other portion of the county solicit for a composter, and they've had the composter come on, and he's having to leverage and try to gain business within the area. And they've changed they sold from one organization to another within a 2 or 3 year period. So we're not always guaranteed a better quality of service if we go out and look for it. I think there's enough things that have happened that have shown we're at a very, very good point where we're at with the operation, and then preparing to get into the cast operation. I think 15-year is appropriate, but you know, if it's 10-year and we want to evaluate at 10 years plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. It still gives us an, I think, language, if Rob can evaluate the language that we do have an out if something occurs, that I think both parties would be open to it, and they definitely want to better invest in what it looks like for us in the future as well. And David, you were in that meeting as well. Is there any additional comments you'd like that?
Maybe, looking at the stepping back a minute to look at the past year or so where we didn't have the permit, Keith, they could have walked at any moment. In those years, you say it could have been eyeball to eyeball and say, well, okay, we're done this year. And they could have left with the permit. And that would have put ReGen in a less favorable position. With this agreement and the 15 years, it is a negotiation where we are getting the permit. So we actually have more flexibility in that we have the permit, we hold that piece of the pie, which is going to give us more flexibility than we've had in the past. We've kind of been tied to Keith Day on this year to year because he has held the permit. And this is, I think, a good period and a good deal for getting that permit and that flexibility in the agreements.
Yeah, I'd like to mention, that David mentions the permit. Our not having the permit is the really, the crunch time. I mean, that's the importance of getting something worked out here so that we have the permit and we're not hostage to someone else having the permit. So, I mean, so he was probably very happy to get, the 15 years. But I'm wondering if we wanted to go to 10, if we'd also be willing to go 555. So that the total is the same with regard to what people are dealing with and amortizing their equipment and so forth. I think that, the end result may be the same for Keith Day. The question is, we need to finalize this agreement and get the permit, get the signatures on it. So we can take a deep breath and say, okay, we've accomplished that, which is a major accomplishment.
I heard from both of you that we can, with a good agreement, the right agreement, that the payments, the rates could change. If situations change for whatever reason, regulatory, perhaps, customers. So then it boils down to, what is the language that's in the agreement that reopens up? It's like a labor negotiation or MOU for labor, right? A reopener statement. I think you called it ins and outs.
Yeah.
So what is that language? And if that language covers a wide range of possibilities, that makes me much more comfortable.
We will redline the agreement with the changes that we discussed yesterday, and then we'll identify that area, and then we'll get it back out to the
Yeah.
board members.
And I understand that would work both ways, like they
Yeah.
could reopen the agreement as well as the district.
Sure.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah, and the rest of the detail that we went through yesterday was really language and the intent of the language, what it meant, so. We were describing, certain areas of the agreement with Keep Day, but, you know, the biggest item was certainly the term and,
Mhm.
how we were gonna, promote the increases as well. So
Mhm.
we'll get we probably can get a prescription within the agreement for that, and then we will have something in the agreement for extraordinary items, you know, if we have to change the type of operation again in another, 4 or 5 years, that we mutually come to that agreement of what that would look like. And, it doesn't give us 100% of the authority, and there's areas of the language where it gives them no room for movement in the item, so, we will try to highlight those areas as well, the catch-all or the risk, assessed areas of language. I think that will help you, feel more comfortable with that term that we can get out. It'll make a lot of other people feel, comfortable as well. I went to the city of Marina last night and talked over this agreement as well.
Mhm.
Mainly because, we have a subcommittee in Marina that was very interested in this before we got here. And we wanted to keep transparency, so we went and played some offense yesterday and described a little bit of the agreement. And then still, some of our best practices that we have in our operation to mitigate odors and emissions and the full gamut of our compliance. And that we're regulated, organization by many agencies, and that we continue to, pass our regulated inspections that we have. So, we played a little bit of offense last night, and I had, similar feedback on the 15 year. You know, why was it important? Why was it essential? And did we have language in there that was, gave us, an opportunity to get out of the agreement if there was anything happening within the operation that they didn't want to address it. I think after the presentation, it was greatly appreciated from the residents. They got an opportunity to speak, and two of the, biggest voices around odor were very supportive of what we're doing. So I think we're on the right track.
And thank you for doing that. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you're
that. That was one of my concerns in this, not odor, sorry, that was a bad transition. But just talking about, the history and like what happens if we get another regulation and all of a sudden we want him to accept something that he doesn't want to accept.
Yeah.
Right, and so I was sort of looking in this, and again, I'm not an expert at reading these, but it seems as though that, he will be obligated to take
Yes.
the things that we give him and process those. So
Right.
that was one of my concerns.
So we'll get a final review, as well with Rob, as we introduce all the red lines that we add to the draft that we presented at the last
Yeah.
board meeting. So you guys will get a read on it, we'll receive more feedback, and then we'll get our final red lines over to Rob for review as well.
Okay, Bill, and then I know Zoe.
Yeah. So we're thinking about changes that the district will make or would be imposed upon the district, but there's also changes that could happen on Keith's Day.
Mhm.
There I mentioned 15 years. They mentioned a sort of conceptual succession plan
Mhm.
within his family. So things certainly could change for him.
Yeah.
And one thing, so there's several rates here. Obviously, there's a top of the line rate. Let's see. Commingled green food waste, but the agenda report mentions other waste fees. So I assume all those will be in the agreement? It's just, it's in the agenda report. I
Yeah.
didn't see them in the agreement, only in the agenda report discussion.
These are the existing rates now,
Mhm.
so
I
it's
didn't see them in the agreement,
just explaining where the rates are at today. That's all it's doing.
but they're gonna be put in the agreement?
I don't think we need to, well, we can as the starting point. So We can't.
I mean, why not?
It's just gonna be a reference to where the rates were at in year one of the agreement. This is referencing where they're at in July 1st of 2025. Yes, we can.
I had a question about, the food waste versus commingled green food waste. I'm assuming the commingled green food waste, that's what's coming from households?
Yes,
And food waste is coming from commercial.
yes.
And so I'm surprised that they're charged the same, because it's my impression that the food waste that's coming from commercial is greatly contaminated and probably needs a lot more work to process versus our food waste, which we're being so careful not to put things into. I was just curious. About
Yeah.
I am.
I can't
Any
speak
thoughts?
to the rates, I can't speak to the rates, but
Okay.
you're correct in that there's more contamination and a longer processing time for the commercial food scraps as compared to the residential commingled product that's coming from households. The
Mhm.
residential commingled is a 90 to 120-day process, and the commercial is between 5 and 6 months. Under the current windrow composting system, that may
Right.
change as we move towards CASP and the technology speeds up at likely both of those processes.
I can't speak to his processing fees either, but I would
Okay.
imagine that it's the volume as well. When we look at food waste volume, it's so small.
From
uh,
commercial.
From the commercial side, and then that
Oh.
residential volume that's really expanded. I think the expanded volume brings down cost, and the small volume kind of raises the cost a little bit, yeah.
But that raises the question, what is the district charging the commercial?
We're charging more for the food waste.
We are.
charging more for
Okay.
Commercial food waste.
Okay.
We are.
More than, the yard,
Yeah,
combined
yes,
yard waste.
yes.
from-
One, I can, I just am looking it up as we're speaking here, so.
Yeah, I know one's more than the other.
The food and yard together coming from residential and or landscapers that is clean, it's being charged at a $47 per ton rate. And the commercial food scraps, which include certified compostable products, are being charged at $67 per ton rate. 47 and 67.
Is that a posted rate?
Yes.
Yes. They both have equal minimum charges of $15 too.
No. Zoe, did you have anything else you wanted to add to the prior conversation about 15-year? It seemed like you had.
Oh, I just, piggybacking on something that you mentioned about legislation, just wanted to really emphasize the fact that not only was East Day a partner in accepting the materials, but he was really the organization that was giving advice as to the acceptance list. As you know, with SB 1383, the state had asked us to accept food soiled paper and other products that would have rendered their existing, which was previously yard trimmings only product, and creating an OMRI certified organic compost. It would have rendered it not organic and thus unable to have the markets that it has within our county and beyond. So not only was he a partner, but they were advisors to our organization. And I think that's really important, because what I've seen in attending conferences across the state is that many of the jurisdictions and processors took Cow Recycle's acceptance list and applied it directly as the state had asked. And we did something a little bit different, knowing we could always open the gates. And if we were truly mandated by Cow Recycle to process those materials, we could do it, but you can never pull back. You can never accept something and then stop accepting it. So we've had a really nice quality product that has led to maintaining markets, whereas other entities have not had that. So I think Keith was always willing to work with us, but he was advising us as well as to what some of the pitfalls could be that maybe the state wasn't even aware of in their effort to divert as much product as possible from the landfill. So good intentions sometimes lead to bad application, and, I think that was an area where they really helped us, and Smooth Valley Recycle has the same acceptance list as well, based upon that advice from Keith Day. They've been, shared, their experiences with ReGen have been shared across the state of conferences as a best practice.
And Cal Recycle is now,
Power Cycle has
It's on
not
board.
had any concerns, and
Okay.
they attend all of our TAC meetings with
Yeah.
regularity, and we have not heard any concerns from them, and we made them aware of this throughout the process. It wasn't, they were at meetings, they were not absent of that conversation. So, I mean, that's not to say that that couldn't change at some point, and then, them kind of force our hand. And then we have to look at future processes, but Keith has always been a very willing partner in that endeavor.
I appreciate that.
Just a little information for Mayor. Article 6 on page 16 of the agreement, or the draft agreement, is gonna be the area.
Okay,
Page 16.
Article 6.
Yeah, it's, the default and the remedies is the section that we wanna probably evaluate for that risk factor, the same for Rob. There is a, section in the reentry and removal of storage of property and repairs. There's a section called termination agreement and damages. There is a 3-year advance notice, that is a concern for, Keith Day. We can sign the agreement and 3 years later say we want an out. It was his concern in the language, so for Rob, I want Rob to evaluate that section there, if that is a true statement from reading that, section there. He requested that it be a longer term before we can have an actual out, because he's going to, be purchasing some equipment, that he wants to better depreciate over a certain amount of time. I think 7 would be the minimum. I think 10 would be the max that we want to be in, but I will look at Rob to give us some guidance on this one particular section as well.
That's the provision being, our terminating the agreement without cause. We just decide that we want to terminate the agreement and give him, in this case, 3 years notice, and I can, see why Keith Day might be concerned about that provision. So here, it's on page 17, section C.
It's in the same section.
Okay, Article 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the same section.
And this is separate,
Yes,
and this is separate from the noticed request to cure.
That's in the very next sentence.
Okay.
Determination for cause and giving the notice. That's the rest of that paragraph.
That was the other item, other than rates that was brought up, and we felt if it does mean 3 years from the time that we sign, we may want to consider that to be around 7 years, so we give them 7 years. Maybe that makes you feel more comfortable with dropping everything that's going on and depreciate any upfront equipment in the 7th year as an opportunity for us to get out sooner than later. But it was a concern for me, as he's giving up that operating
Yeah,
permit,
that makes
and
sense.
3 years we could spin it
Right.
around and be out, right? That was definitely risky for him.
Could make it that it triggers after 7 years.
Yes, yes,
Starting
yes.
in 7 years.
oh, the 3-year after 7.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for your feedback. We
Yeah, sure.
appreciate the discussion around it, because
yeah, it's important.
yeah, we had a lot of people watching this item.
Good. All right, we'll move on to 4C, discuss the draft reimbursement agreement for ReGen staff time regarding LM Waters pipeline alignment to the south end.
I'll do a little intro and then David can help us fill in. Background is Cal-Am owns the property just west of the Last Chance Mercantile. They own several acres out there. It's for a desal plant. And they've had inquiries over the whole period of time that they've owned that property with ReGen easements. And we wanted to be compensated, so we worked on a reimbursement draft agreement that would give us a credit from Cal-Am in advance of doing any work for them on it, and then we can also give feedback and report back to the board at the same time, but we felt this agreement was the first step to really understanding where Cal-Am wants to go next with decel and, getting it established and, trekking the pathway, so. They've asked us for several things, and we felt like I think it's time for us to cover our position on our time and our value within our engineering department. We're very busy. We have lots of projects, lots of things to get done here. And to be stretching them and pulling time for oddball requests that may not be moving at the pace that they expect it to be moving in. We got Rob involved, and I'll hand it over to David for some of the details on the requests that they've had.
And so, as Felipe mentioned, that project's been going on for a number of decades. You guys are well aware of the goings on. And as part of that project, they are requesting from ReGen various easements and various pipelines they want to put in ReGen's property. And so that's going to require more engineering time, as Felipe mentioned. So this draft reimbursement agreement is kind of the opener. We've been working with Rob, and we're ready to start negotiating with Cal-Am about that agreement and how and what's going to be included in it. It's not a commitment to give them any rights to property, any easements or pipelines. That's very clear, and Rob made sure that was in there. That we're not saying we're going to make anything happen. This is just an opener, just for us to look at the project, for us to spend our time and give them feedback. And we've gotten a preliminary set of drawings, which we have initial comments on, but we wanted to bring it to light for the board that this project is in the works, that there are requests from Cal-Am for real property access. And we're gonna be talking with them we get the head nods from the finance committee and the board to do such.
Can I ask, are we at the point, this has a interesting history, like hot and cold. I mean, we used to, and Felipe and David know best of me. I know a guy used to get a call from somebody from Cal-Am, they wanted to meet next week or sometime later this month. Then, and we said, okay, well, and so we worked on this reimbursement group. So then we wouldn't hear from them for 6 months. And so have we heard from them again? Are they back at the table?
We have heard from them again, and they've got a laundry list of items that they need to address for the Coastal Commission, for all these various alphabet soup agencies that want a list of things. And they also need to figure out where they're gonna put the pipes. And that piece they've been running with engineering wise, it's not a difficult endeavor. It's really put pipes in the ground. However, they need cooperation and input from others that they're wanting to get at this time. I think they don't have agreements from ReGen that we're going to be offering any property, but their engineering team is moving forward with certain assumptions. And this is our opportunity to respond to their assumptions and let them know what our position is as ReGen and what our needs for our property are.
And the interest that, the first interest was, well, must have an interest that they want to use the road. They want an easement. They want access to the piece of property that they purchased from Dole, I believe. That sits just before you come into the plant area. That they may already have that. That may be whatever Dole acquired an easement when they got that property to use Charlie Benson Lane, and they may or may not have that. Suddenly, and I think when we first heard from them, that was the question. Oh, of course, they want to be able to come up the road, and then the question was, well, then they're going to be running pipes from the coast over here, bringing the water, from the famous slant wells, over to a facility here, and then it suddenly dawned on us. Then they have to take that product and take it over to Monterey One Water. How do they get it over there? Are they going to so that, you know, and none of this has ever been explained to us of exactly what's the expansion, the breadth of their request. And is it going to include that they're gonna get to the facility, then they want a pipeline that stays on our property and runs over to Monterey One Water. And the question, as you know, been taking, I know Felipe and David and Guy have been looking, we're now looking at the need we have for every inch of property we have. That, you know, is committed and permitted for the use that we have for it. Do we, you know, are we gonna give away part of that property by allowing a pipeline that maybe or maybe not, we can't, you know, build over the top of it, you know, with landfill at some point. So it's it's gonna be interesting to see. And I would just mention sort of casually, I hope, that we have to keep in mind that Cal-Am gets very political in these matters. We might recall the situation that just went on with LAFCO, where everybody in LAFCO on that side over there, well, somehow they decided that, you know, these issues relative to that issue between the Water Management District and Cal-Am. So it has they're not hesitant to play the political game, and we need to be prepared for that.
Through the chair. It
Yeah.
just, I think it was our opportunity to inform and involve the board to be aware that they're making requests that we may not be okay with. And you guys may be approached, politically around their position and our position. This one, we haven't agreed to anything, but we're ready to keep you guys informed and abreast. You know, we don't want a pipeline right up the Charlie Benson Road. No, that's when they have to do repair work, it'd be very challenging for our organization to have to deal with that. Our four-way intersection is another one of those areas where we wouldn't want to be impacted as well. So Rob is bringing up items where you may indirectly be approached about why we don't want it on Charlie Benson Road. We will report and keep the board abreast of the requests that they have, but you know, the agreement portion is tell us what your need is, we'll tell you what our cost is for that service, and then we'll work from there, and then we'll keep you guys informed at the same time.
And the basis of it is really spending public time and effort for the benefit of our private organization. And so that's why we want to get this agreement together, so we're not, we're ReGen's costs are covered.
So, a few things here. First, I know that Monterey One already has that agreement, right? So I would hope that we could,
We asked them for it.
okay, good.
Yeah, I talked to Paul, Rob had made the recommendation, that I believe they have one already. So we asked them for it and we used it as our base.
And so the reason why this is heating up is because M1 on Monday, we just had a meeting that, where we did approve. Because, so, Cal-Am since they went to Coastal, sort of, lessen the amount of water that they're gonna make from their plant. But with that decrease in brine, they've had to, change what they have to do in terms of engineering for our outfall pipe, right? Because they're gonna have to kind of retrofit our outflow pipe to send their brine out. And there was some changes that were made that the engineering team and Paul were really concerned with. And so, there's also potential for them to have a brine storage tank at this facility here, which would then need to be piped over to M1, right, to get to the outfall pipe. So there's some increased engineering that wasn't mentioned in the original EIR. And so, we need to amend the permit, right, to allow this brine to go through our outfall. And so there was questions on Monday in terms of, you know, who's the lead agency for the EIR amendment, if so, that, you know, if that happens. It was clear that all this engineering, analysis can't be done until it's sent to the Regional Water Quality Board, to have them say, okay, we've got this project in front of us, and now we're gonna start looking at it. So we did approve that on Monday, so we'll be going to the Regional Water Quality Board. They will then, the process to look at evaluating the engineering that is gonna need to happen with our outfall, and probably with all the pipes that'll, go from their facility over to M1, I think will start to be analyzed. So, CalAm, their goal is to start groundbreaking, at the end of 2025. So, they still need to go back to the Coastal Commission, right, to show that they've met all these different guidelines. So they're pushing as hard as they can. So I wouldn't be surprised if you start getting more requests. So, your time, whether it's coming from CalAm, whether it's coming from the Regional Water Quality Board, whether it's coming from, I don't know what agencies are gonna be contacting you. The EIR was completed under the CPUC with like oversight from the sanctuary. So, it was unclear who's gonna be, if they do have to do an amendment to the EIR, who's gonna be the lead agency or the responsible, it was like lead agency and responsible party. I don't know. So, I do feel like CalAm needs to reimburse us for whatever work we do on their project from whomever it's coming from. Whether it's, again, to complete the CIR or whatever. So, and I would like to also be apprised of requests of things that are happening, because you're right, we do need as much land as we can, right, as we look to the future. And so I think we need to be smart about how we approach this, but at the very least, we need to be compensated for the time we spend on this.
Thank you.
Bill?
A couple questions, interesting. How do you invoice CalAm?
How do we invoice them now? So the past practice has not been to, we've received information and they've been relatively benign requests of like giving them some small comments or feedback. And this pipeline that is seeming like they want to break ground, they want to actually put things in the ground. We are going to track time organization wide and then submit it to accounting, and then they will send an invoice.
So in other words, ReGen has never charged CalAm.
Correct, right.
Not previously.
Okay, so, suggest that, you set up, an escrow account. CalAm puts in, let's say, a starter, modest amount of money, $250,000. And that, the district can, withdraw from that escrow account as, right.
I think the retainer for Monterey Water was about 75,000, I think was the number, but
That's it?
that wasn't very much, but the request, like David had said, has been really small up front. It would just be, okay, well, I'm taking a request and this is what we're doing for it.
Let's make it 250 and then, or something like that, and then you're ready, you don't have to come back
That's a
to
good
it,
suggestion.
in 6 months as these requests, ramp up, you'll have to figure out, you don't already have a fully burdened labor rate and time writing.
Right.
You'll need to set that up, obviously.
Somewhat of a preview on what our comments would drastically reduce the scope of work that's on ReGen's property. Just to kind of, if the board agrees with that approach, that's something we would recommend, is to basically eliminate the pipelines that are going on ReGen's property to just perpendicular crossings.
So.
Yeah.
So, that brings up my second question, which is who has the authority in the district, to, authorize a lease or encroachment? Is it the general manager? Is it the board?
It would be the board.
The board for any lease and any encroachment?
Right, yeah, the general manager would be involved along with the staff in any negotiations, and then would bring a recommendation to the board on that matter for the board to consider one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mentioned, in the Monterey One staff report, not necessarily from CalAm, that they will need to get easements for their pipelines. So, I would imagine, CalAm is again moving forward on all fronts. And so, there was a marine life mortality study that's still gonna take another year, right? So they still have some time, but they are moving as fast as they can on everything else. So again, if the EIR is happening over here, you know, I think Monterey One wants them to also evaluate what is the environmental impact of having pipes, you know, in different places, in addition to the changes to their outfall pipe. So, so yeah, so we'll see what kind of, I don't know if CalAm will just all of a sudden start trying to figure out easements without the environmental work being done. So I wouldn't be surprised. The minute that this was on the agenda, I received an email from CalAm wanting to meet with me. So,
That's the way they operate.
Yeah.
And our thoughts would be to bring our recommendations to the board before making them official to CalAm, since this is such a high profile project and the implications of where they're asking for easements, which are right next to our landfill, our future landfill, where we need leachate piping systems, gas piping systems. We have our own utility needs in those areas. And so we would bring those recommendations to the board for consideration and approval, that those are the guidance forward that the board is willing to accept.
I mean, and let's be honest too, right? We're still waiting on a CPUC decision about supply and demand, right? They can come out and say, this isn't needed, and now everything's moved. So that's probably not gonna come until, it was supposed to have already come, but that'll probably come towards the end of the year. I don't think ReGen should be making any decisions before we know for sure something's gonna be happening. I don't feel like we should be wasting the board's time on that until we actually have, we know that this is gonna go forward.
And when will that
That's my
be?
opinion. Well, again, the CPUC decision on supply and demand, I talked to Paul, it sounds like maybe towards the end of the year, we'll know. So, but before that, they're gonna act as if everything is full board ahead.
Well, and that being the case, do we want to even entertain anything until we get a response? Do we want to draft maybe a letter or something saying, hey, until we get the result, we don't, can we do that?
Well, we could. We're not gonna be, CalAm's gonna request that we just
Yeah.
move forward, you know, they just,
Yeah.
as I say, they just, not to be disrespectful, but they clearly run hot and cold on this issue. You know, one day they wanna get everything done, you know, in 3 months, and next time we hear from them, we don't hear from them for 6 months.
Mhm.
So there's those things, you know, run hot and cold, so I think we could take that position. But you know, it's gonna be pressured up, the pressure's gonna be on for us not to take that position, but to move forward and cooperate with them and get everything worked out in advance, whether they're gonna get final approval or not.
Mhm. David,
There may be information that would be useful to them up front that don't require easements to be given, that don't require
mhm.
commitments, that we may be able to give them comments on, this is what ReGen is willing to accept.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
So they know.
and so they know how to design, basically.
Yeah.
But not commit to.
Yeah, you're not suggesting that ReGen stop talking to Cal.
No, I just don't want something coming to the board, right? I don't want all the work of coming to the board when we don't have all the information we need to make a
But
decision.
as far as reimbursing, they're asking the
Yeah,
district
no,
for
I think,
information and getting
Yeah.
fully reimbursed for it.
yes.
They're
Yeah.
not opposed to
Yeah,
that.
no, and, you know, I think M1 Water also, you know, we need to act like, oh, well, we need to be a partner, right? They have land next to us. We have to be a partner. I'm okay as long as we're getting reimbursed for that. But again, we're not gonna making any decisions until for,
And our situation is different than M1 Water. Obviously, they're hooked up to, you know, with the facility to take everything out to the ocean and so forth, to get rid of the brine that they're not gonna use. But so there's pipelines that, Cal-Am has an interest in. The interest of Monterey One Water, is specifically limited to being the, disposer of the excess water and the brine and so forth. We have a different situation in that we have, there's a question here, and it's been very interesting that we've had these presentations from staff, from Felipe and Guy and David, with regard to what all do we need of the acreage that we have? And it would seem that the answer is, we need all of it. And it's limited, to the extent that we give some away or impair the use of it. The question is, well, then what happens to our 75 or 100-year lifespan and so forth, when we really plan to use at some point, and at some point, it's not gonna be 75 and 100 years, it's gonna be 20 years, and we just need to figure out how to put the cap on and things like that. But what we don't want to do is impair our ability, this district's ability to use all the property that it's ever going to need. We're not gonna be able to find excess adjacent land that anyone's gonna let us use for a landfill.
Just, Rob, do you know, how is, title held on Charlie Benson Road?
It's owned by this district.
Fee?
And yeah, and then at the time that this district sold that parcel that Monterey One Water needed and acquired adjacent to us, that was sold by this district to Monterey One Water, and they have the access rights that we did too, and we basically share, as I understand, the cost of maintaining and repairing that roadway.
And there's different kinds of easements on Charlie Benson Lane. There's ingress egress, which just allow you to travel, and then there's pipeline easements. And so there's the M1W egress ingress easement, and then the Cal-Am property also has an ingress egress easement, so they can access that property from Charlie Benson Lane. That is some encumbrance on the land, but they don't have a pipeline easement.
And they have, it occurs to some of us that they have other options besides us. That's just something to look at.
Mhm. Okay. Anything else? Does that give you what you need?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's-
Yeah, we haven't actually have you talked about the reimbursement, we have a reimbursement agreement that we prepared back when things, as they say, are hot and cold. They were running hot at one time, and we prepared a reimbursement agreement, which we've given to them, and I guess we're gonna get comments back about that. They might not like everything in our draft reimbursement
This
agreement.
conversation is gonna allow us to have those discussions with Cal-Am, so we'll start talking to them, now that we have Rob's version of the agreement. We'll get in contact, send them the agreement, and then start the discussions about finalizing that.
Right, and then we need to keep the board informed about all of these things that are going forward, because as I say, since they run hot and cold, sometime we're gonna be in the middle of it. It's gonna be hot for us as well.
Mhm. So will this be on our, this month's board agenda?
Yeah. Right.
All right, good, thank you. All right, general manager communications.
Just one is I was at the city of Marina last night, presenting the key data agreement, sharing a little bit. I had Ida give you guys a copy of that
Mhm.
presentation, so you guys can have it. I appreciate any feedback that you guys will be giving me on it. Or you can watch, that segment of the meeting last night. So thank you very much, okay?
How many people were there?
Two who spoke on this issue, right?
Two of the subcommittee that we're aware of that always have been participating in the odor awareness in Marina. So again, I think all the way around the council had good feedback. Their community had good feedback, and I walked away feeling like we're working really, really hard to mitigate and do our portions in managing the waste that we receive here, keeping an eye on everything. And I think it was an opportunity for them to evaluate language and for them to know that they've been heard. And we hadn't made a decision yet before they were informed about it. So it's in that process. I've got to look at everybody in the community, wholeheartedly, without feeling a certain way that I didn't give them awareness that this was coming to our board.
you. All right, any future agenda items?
I have
Bill?
one. Surprise.
I know,
Yeah.
you're not predictable at all.
So, what I'd, like to see on the agenda is discussion of developing new financial tools. For the district, obviously for the board as well. So, to state the obvious, the district over the last few decades has evolved tremendously. New technologies, new services, new customers, volumes, landfill volumes have tripled. One thing that has not evolved that I can tell is that we have a simple financial system. It's a single enterprise fund. And we don't have the tools to drill down and look at the key services. And I'll just to state the obvious, the landfill, the single stream recyclable, composting, C&D, and household hazardous waste. So those are the main services, right? And we need to understand what are the costs of those services. We know what we're charging the customers, but we don't know what each of these individual services cost. And we need that. All right, that's tool. And then aligned with that is when you look at an individual service to know who are the customers, what volume of that service each of the customers are using, and what is the price, because as you all know, our customers don't all pay the same price for the same service. And so those are the tools that the district needs. And well, what will that do? That's a lot of work. I really admit it's gonna be a change in mindset for the district and work involved to make it happen. But first of all, it will tell us when we look at future agreements with customers, we'll be able to assess, well, if this customer is taking this service and this much of that one, and that much of the other service, and this is what they're gonna pay, then we can assess that on the overall financial health of the district. We can't do that today. Also, we need to know what services have a surplus revenue. Maybe some do. I was looking at thank you for the composting ones. If I threw in an overhead number, my own making, and it looked like composting was a wash. But some of the services are obviously subsidized, the household hazardous waste, fully subsidized. Some might have a surplus. We need to understand the finances for each service. And we could spot trends with this information. Then we get to what has already been mentioned and we got a great report that shows us here are the customers, here's the contracts, here, a point in time, here's the rates, the volumes. We can start to see some trends if we track this information with these tools, we'll be able to see over time where it's going. So anyhow, that's my simple request for an agenda item.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
All right, it says to return to open session, but we're already in the open session, so we're just gonna adjourn. So thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.